Welcome to Turning Pain into Purpose with Joeel and Natalie Rivera. In this 4-part podcast, we share the stories of how the heartache and challenges in our lives were the fuel that ignited our passions, called us to become entrepreneurs, and gave us the freedom to determine our destiny and fulfill our life's greater purpose. We hope this show inspires you to believe that within any challenge or pain lies the seeds of possibility for transformation, meaning, and purpose. No matter where you are or what you've been through, you have a unique gift to share with the world. Life isn't happening to you, it's happening for you.
So again, welcome. I am truly excited to be interviewing you. Obviously, we're going to be talking about things that we talk a lot, that we've talked about in our journey, being together, exploring ideas and things like that. And the reason I'm so excited, because obviously you're my wife, you're my best friend, but you're an amazing human being more than anything. I admire your journey. I admire everything that you bring to this world and what you do to contribute. You motivate me to become better every day. So I know that everyone watching us is going to get a lot out of this. They're going to be able to be inspired by your own journey, just like I'm inspired by your journey. So welcome, welcome, welcome.
Well, thank you. I'm excited to get started. And this is really something that I know both of us have wanted to do for a long time. It's just really to share our stories more in their entirety than we have ever before in any of the other material we've done. And so I'm really looking forward to this. And I'm also looking forward to interviewing you next. So we're doing these back to back. And so I'm ready.
All right. So let's get started. The first question I really going to dig into is, what influencing experiences did you have in your journey that really planted seeds of entrepreneurship, but not just entrepreneurship, really heart-centered entrepreneurship? Because at your core, everything that you've kind of focused on a lot in your journey is how can you give and contribute and build things and create. So were there any things that really created those seeds to help you explore entrepreneurship?
So really the first thing that ever started the ball rolling in that direction was the fact that I always felt really different. Like I was a weird kid and I just never felt like I fit. So it wasn't really surprising as my life continued to unfold that I found that I wasn't following a traditional path, because I really never did. I, danced to the beat of a different drummer. And so my first experience that really showed me that entrepreneurship, or basically making your own money, was possible was I was about 11 years old, and my family always used to go to yard sales. And so on my own, I just decided that I was not going to play with Barbies anymore. Not that I really did that much in the first place, but I had a bunch of Barbie stuff. So I collected it all up, and I never even talked to my parents about it. I just stuck it all in a big box, and I walked down to the end of my road onto the corner, and I put my stuff out there. And I think I had drawn myself a little sign or something, and I sold my Barbies for $8. And I just thought that was the most exciting thing, because when you're 11 years old and you make your own money without anybody's help at all, it's pretty empowering. And so, of course, I walked down the street with my friend later that day and bought candy with it or something silly, but it really stuck out of my mind. I always remembered that. And then, so that kind of unusual entrepreneurial spirit continued as I got older. In high school, it wasn't a business, but I was always doing something really again, it's on my own, independently. So I was the leader of a hip hop dance group for at-risk kids that was student run. So again, there was no adult around telling us what to do. I was leading this. And then also, as far as the heart-centered part of it, I always, starting in middle school, I was always everyone's counselor, which obviously I've been a life coach. We're going to get to that later. And I know a lot of life coaches, and a lot of us have that sort of feeling. And a lot of other heart-centered entrepreneurs also have always been helpers. So it's I'm that person everyone came to for advice, or just to be the shoulder to lean on, or just to listen. And so I was always attracted to people who wanted to open up, like even random strangers. One time I was at a McDonald's and I was like 14, and some random adult came and sat next to me and just started talking about his problems, which I have no idea. I don't remember what they were, but I just found it weird, but also like not that weird because everyone did, like even, you know, adults in my life, like friends of my parents, like people just opened up to me. It was what they did. So that also, you know, combined with what I said about that hip hop dance group, it wasn't just dance, also doing tutoring and ultimately trying to help kids stay in school that otherwise might have dropped out by creating community. And so I was always in that role of wanting to help people and facilitating in one way or another, facilitating something.
And I know that you've told me in the past about like the dance troupe, and one of the things that I love about the stories that you've shared about it is really that part of your focus, like you said, it was trying to help kids stay in school, stay motivated, stay off drugs, and all these different things. So it wasn't just a dance troupe, it was really finding ways to, like you said, create that community, create that bond, and really look to do something more productive with life. So, and you know, you say $8, but for any kid, really $8 is a big deal. It's like, oh my God, I just made $8 for myself. And obviously I'll talk about my past, but I was the same way as a kid. The first time I made some money for my own, I was like, oh my God, I can make money for myself. You know, that's exciting part of the process. So let me ask you, was there a point that you knew that you may not fit into a traditional box of employment, or did you think that you were going to go in that traditional box and something really changed in your journey that shifted that?
Well, I always had an inkling that I didn't want to go in the box. And actually, starting at like 14 years old, I was a bit preachy. That my parents would attest to that. They used to joke that I should run for president because I was always very opinionated and not afraid to share my thoughts. So big surprise, this is what I do for a living, right? But so I used to stand on a soapbox and go off about all the things that were wrong with the world, and specifically that I really didn't believe in the American dream, like not the fake version of it that we're all sold, that you're supposed to go to school and get good grades so that you can get into a college and continue to get good grades, and you can get a job in some career that you probably don't like, and you spend, you know, most of your waking life at this job, and you work really hard until you're 65, and then you retire, and then statistically you die 5 years later, and during that retirement, for most people, you're living in poverty. And to me, like, that whole idea just sucked. I was never interested, even before I was really even able to understand it, because of course I'm 14, like I'm not even working yet. So I don't know what it's like, but I was observing all the adults around me. And what I noticed was that I never met anyone that like really loved what they did or that was really happy in life. But then here they are giving me advice, telling me to do the same things that they did because it's what you should do. And so I like to describe it like, it's like they were trying to sugarcoat it, but I knew that the sugarcoating was BS and that it was really more like a cat turd in a candy shell. And so like, I had so much passion against this, but I really didn't know what else to do. And when I went to college, well, actually, before I went to college, I was just like looking at the list of all the majors that I could major in college. And I was like going down the list, like, don't want to do that, don't want to do that, don't want to do that. Nope, absolutely not. Like this one makes me want to gag. Like I was just so not interested in any of it. And even if there were topics I liked, the idea of like having to do it all the time and make a living was horrible. And so I took a year off after high school because I just felt like I worked so hard. I was a straight A student. I just needed a break and I didn't know what the hell I wanted to do. And during that time, I got a job at Walmart. And so needless to say, after about a year, I was like running back to college. And actually, I didn't even make it a whole year. I started taking classes at a community college.
So what did you go for originally?
Originally, it was business. I wanted to get a degree in business. I was leaning towards entrepreneurship even back then, but the colleges I was going to didn't have an entrepreneurship program, at least at first. And so much of the beginning classes in that, well, the first 2 years of college are the same no matter what your major is anyway. But then even the business classes, a lot of it was the same, whether it was an entrepreneurship program or traditional. So I just started taking whatever business classes I could get into. And actually I think it took 3 classes like that second semester before I went full time. And one of them was a business class. So I was always definitely interested in that.
So what about your parents? What did they do?
Well, my dad actually, he had originally gone to school for philosophy, and neither of my parents finished college because I was born, and they moved. But my dad ended up going back later and getting a degree in technology, and so he was a network administrator, and actually he worked with the computers when they first started. So I remember going, one of the jobs he had, well, he worked at NASA for a little while, but another job that he had was at a hospital. And I went to see where he worked, and he had those mainframe computers that like filled the room. And I just remember being blown away. So I grew up around computers. I was one of the first people I knew that had one. And my mom was in customer service and a variety of different things as I grew up. But she's a health insurance and regulation analyst. And both of them enjoyed their careers, and they weren't miserable, but they definitely weren't passionate about it. And it didn't seem to fulfill them. And so that really imprinted on me. It's like seeing them come home at the end of the day and be exhausted. And they did a lot of other things to fulfill their lives, but it always just seemed like such a waste.
So were they entrepreneurs at all, or did you learn that from somewhere else?
They were to some degree, more when I was older. My dad had like a side business doing consulting. And then actually when I was an early adult, they got into real estate investing, which was actually a shared passion between all of us. We all used to sit around the table when I was, I think at the end of high school, maybe 18, 19, right on the cusp. Well, I graduated when I was 17, but it was right in that time period. We all read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and we had the cash flow game, and we all learned investing together. And my parents were actually investing in property at that time. So that was when I was a very young adult, and that definitely made me always interested in the idea that you could create money outside of a job. So that was the first time I really saw something that was completely outside of the box.
Okay. So what really made you really decide to kind of embrace possibly being an entrepreneur? Obviously, you were saying you're working at Walmart and doing things like that. But what shifted in that light bulb that said, yeah, maybe I do want to be an entrepreneur?
Well, I dabbled a little bit. And actually, my first dabbling was becoming an Herbalife distributor. And so as most people who get into a multi-level marketing, they get sucked in by someone else. So I had a friend, and they were a distributor, and they were going to one of those, big like hoorah events. And he invited me, and I went, and I think I was 18 or 19 at the time. And I went, and of course, it sucks you in. It's kind of fun. I liked the concept of it. I did it about a year, but I found I really hate sales. It's not my thing. So it was like business. Yes, this feels good. This is my thing. Sales and trying to convince people to buy something. That is not my thing. And actually still to this day, it is still not my thing. And it's not, I just have a different view of sales. I don't think you should try to convince somebody of anything. I think you should just be real, and it shouldn't be like twisting someone's arm. And I didn't like that. So I got out of it. But I remember going out, one of my first like online purchases, because back then it wasn't that common to buy stuff online, was these signs that I had made that you like stick the stakes in and you put them out like on the side of the road. And
Yeah,
I
I know
did
what you're
that.
talking about.
Yeah, trying to sell my Herbalife. So that was one of my first steps in that direction.
So you're already doing a little bit of guerrilla marketing.
Yeah, yeah. And actually, it was before, like we take it for granted now. It was before things like Vistaprint, where you can have them printed. So I actually just had to order the raw signs and like, I think I airbrushed them. Like I got like letters and I like airbrushed them. You have to make it by hand. So back in the day, it was a lot of work. And so.
And it really makes you realize how fortunate we are to be living in an age now where you can just go into an app or go into a website and put your information, put it through Facebook or whatever it is, where back then it's like, like you say, even Vistaprint, which is something that most people have been using for a long time, or another service like it, that you didn't have that kind of services back then. So, we've come a long way. So if you're an entrepreneur, you're trying to be an entrepreneur, you have so many more tools at your disposal right now that it makes it so easy to really get started and really follow your passion and dreams. So I want to rewind a little bit. So you were going to school. Did you end up finishing college, or what did you go for as far as you say you started in business? Did you stay in business, and how did that go?
So in the end, it took me 8 years to finish my degree because I kept changing my major because, of course, I didn't like any of them. And I was working full time and life was happening. And I didn't feel committed to it. And in the meantime, I ended up in a graphic design and marketing career that was totally unintentional. So I got my associate's degree in business because I took a whole bunch of classes and I was pretty close to being done my bachelor's, but I didn't want to keep going because really what I found was I had already gotten to the point where I was taking the capstone classes in business, and I just found them boring. I found it like, come on, like this is common sense. Yeah. Well, and it's like, now I realize it's not common sense, and it's just that like this is my thing and I get it. But I just didn't like the bureaucracy of it. And so my other major I toyed with like on and off for years was being a teacher. But the problem is that when I would take the education classes, again, I was like turned off by the bureaucracy. Like I loved learning how to teach, but I hated what you had to do in order to teach in a school. And so I have a lot of coursework in education, but eventually I said no. And again, I was close to graduating and said, no, this isn't for me. And then I found sociology, and I had taken a lot of psychology courses, but sociology brings the psychology into the collective. And when I took those courses, my mind went like, oh my God, this is my thing. So that's what I ended up getting my degree in, with also like a concentration in education and business. And so ironically, my first like career job was I was applying for an accounting position. And they happened to mention in the accounting job that if you happen to have, graphic design skills, that would be a bonus. And I was like, okay, weird combination. I thought I was literally the only person that like was on the creative side and on the like really cranial numbers type side. But when I interviewed with them, they ended up creating a new position, and I became a marketing specialist. And so that's how I got into this design career that I never really wanted, but it was enjoyable. I liked the creative part. And so I was, pretty close to being done school, but I hadn't quite graduated yet. And here I am in this career I never asked for. And I just was burnt out and I felt empty. And it was like every day I felt like someone had like drilled a hole in me and like drained out my blood. Like it felt terrible. And my life looked really good from the outside. And I was always struggling with that feeling like I really should be pretty happy with this. But the truth is that I obviously wasn't. And I felt like crap all the time. I was exhausted and fatigued all the time. And I remember sitting in my cubicle, AKA voluntary prison, and looking at the carpet on the floor underneath my desk and just thinking like, it feels so good to curl up in a ball under there and take a nap. And so that was kind of where I was at. And then
I must say though that I worked in a cubicle in college. Well, I was going to college, and I did take many naps in that cubicle. Not underneath, but I did take many naps. You know, I perfected the art of putting my hands to the side and putting my head down and closing my eyes for at least 10 minutes at a time. Obviously, working full time, going to school full time. So, yeah, about that.
Yeah. And some people, they can find their groove there. But for me, it was like torturous. And by the time I got home, it's like I would scramble to like cook dinner and eat and clean up and like run around the house like a crazy person trying to get everything done. Because even though I was, I think, you know, I was in my early 20s, I was at that place where by 7:30, my body was done, like completely done. And to me, this was normal. I had felt this way for years and years and years, actually, since I had been sick in high school. But I never noticed it wasn't normal until one time I was at a traffic light on my way home from work. And I was in the front of the line and the light turned red. And I thought to myself, I wonder how long the light is. I wonder if there's enough time for me just to close my eyes for a minute and rest. And then so I hear myself thinking this, and then I thought, that's kind of weird, right? And I looked around at all the other people that were stopped at the red light at the intersection, and they were all like twice my age, and none of them looked like they were about ready to croak out in the middle of the intersection from exhaustion. And so it was the first time I realized there was something wrong. And so I went to the doctor, and bazillion tests later, they don't find anything obvious. And they tell me I have chronic fatigue syndrome, which after researching later on, I found out basically means that they don't know what the crap is wrong with you. And so that was kind of a trigger also that pushed me kind of over the edge as far as cliff diving into entrepreneurship.
So having chronic fatigue syndrome, you say, kind of helped you become an entrepreneur at some level, being tired.
Yeah, well,
but wanting that freedom, I'm assuming. But actually, before I even go into kind of asking that, I also want to point out that it's interesting because you said that you got into marketing and it wasn't really what you were even applying for. It was kind of like that, how it kind of unfolded. But the reality is that many of us, you know, we have doors that open up for us and we don't know what those seeds are, how they're going to impact us long term. Because just like for you, that's been a blessing for many things that we've done in our own business, you know, and just like some of the experiences I've had that there's like, that's not really what I wanted to do at the time, or I didn't know how much of a blessing it is. So it's always remembering that we can always reflect back on some of the skills and talents that we develop in our own lives, accidentally or because of necessity, and how can we use those things now to help us create what we want to create. So I do want to go back though to really the chronic fatigue syndrome and how that kind of drove you to become an entrepreneur as well.
Well, you're absolutely right about the marketing and graphic design. I like to look at it as a bridge. So it was unintentional, but it was exactly what I needed, because if I hadn't learned graphic design and marketing, then it's not that I couldn't have done the entrepreneurial things I've done and that we couldn't have done what we've done in our business, but it would have been so much harder and it would have taken a lot longer. It would have been more expensive because we would have been having to pay someone else to do all the work. So it was definitely a blessing. And, you know, looking back on it, like I'm absolutely glad that I ended up in that path and not accounting of all things. So it was definitely perfect. But so again, the chronic fatigue syndrome. So basically I got to a point where I just felt so terrible that the trigger moment for me was there was one morning that the alarm went off and I reached over to hit the snooze button, but I was filled with such a feeling of dread and anger. Like I was furious that I had to get up to go to work. And so the thought came to my mind, if I had to kill someone, but doing so would mean that I would never, ever have to wake up to this damn alarm clock again, then I might actually consider it. And so, of course, I'm groggy and like this is going through my mind. And then I'm thinking to myself, holy crap, like I just thought that this isn't okay. Like I should not hate my life this much. And so, of course, I didn't really get the hint right away when that happened, but it was shortly after that there was a day that I was sitting in my cubicle, my cell, and my butt was planted in my chair at 3:00 in the afternoon, only because I had no choice, because I was done absolutely everything that I could do for the day. But I just sat there feeling bitter about the fact that we live in this stupid corporate world that pays you for how much time you sit in a chair versus what you're actually doing. And that I got penalized for being super efficient. But I had to stay there just as long as everybody else, even if I got done my work sooner. And I was really pissed off about it. And I just started to feel really overwhelmed. And I couldn't take it anymore. And so I went to my boss and faked being sick, basically, looking like I was going to throw up, said I needed to leave. And I just got in the car and I just started driving. Like I wasn't going home. I just wanted to get anywhere other than there. And like, it was like that feeling, like that was that moment that I knew what I had to do. And I knew I had to go independent. I knew I could not make myself fit in that corporate box. Like it was not going to happen. It was killing me. And it scared the crap out of me.
So how old were you at this point?
I was 23.
Okay.
So it was like 23 years old. I'm like,
and your favorite number too.
Yeah, it is. So it was like symbolic. I always knew something was going to happen when I was 23. I just didn't realize that quitting my job forever was going to be it. But that's exactly what happened. So I left in my car and I went and I ended up driving like 45 minutes away to my favorite park, which is actually Wekiva Springs, which you lived near there for a while.
Yes, I did.
And so when I went in, I like turned down a side road that I hadn't ever taken before. And I just kept driving until the car felt like stopping. Like I ended up parking somewhere. I got out of the car. I just started walking. It was almost as if I was trying to escape my life at that point, but I couldn't go any further. I didn't know where else to go. So I just started walking, and then I just saw this spot. There's like this like swampy pond that drew my attention, and I just went and I sat down and I just started crying. And it was like this crazy, overwhelming mix of emotions. Like on one hand, feeling like horrible, like I suck at life and I can't do this adulting thing. And I don't know why I can't just submit to what everybody tells me I'm supposed to do. And then part of me also felt this like overwhelming sense of freedom, because I knew in my heart that not only did I think that there really had to be a better way than this, because this sucked, but that I was going to make a way. Like there was no way possible that I was going to submit to this. And so it was in that moment that I knew that entrepreneurship was my path. And the next day I quit. But here's that like blessing of the marketing design thing. I didn't just quit. What I did is I convinced them to hire me to keep doing the graphic design part of my position, because I did a whole bunch of other stuff. I ran their membership program and events and a whole bunch of other stuff. So they said yes, and they hired me to be a contractor, which gave me like enough of a start where I could then build a graphic design and marketing business as a freelancer or a contractor on my own. And so that was how I retired at 23, by convincing my company to hire me. And that design, again, was a bridge that helped me go from what I didn't want to what I did want. And so it wasn't ideal, but it was a foot in the door to being in control of my own life.
You know, it's interesting also, that there's the book 4 Hour Work Week, and obviously you hadn't read it at this point yet. I don't even think it's probably created at that point.
Yet.
But, what's interesting about it is that that's one of the best ways to transition, because I had a similar experience where I was able to transition by having my investor or my job really hire me as a contractor. And I know many people that kind of are able to do that and at least get some income from that as they transition, where obviously for you, it's not like you just had to leave all your finances in the table and say, I quit, because you were able to at least have a foundation in this process.
Yeah, exactly. And obviously, if I didn't have that, I would have had to find another way to fulfill that financial need. I also consciously made decisions to like dramatically reduce expenses and stuff so that I could handle not having the full-time income, because I knew it would take time to build up my side business, but also having the flexibility. Like I was one of those people that I just didn't like going to school full-time and working full-time, which is part of the reason why it took me 8 years. So I had 1 year left of school at that point. And since I was working independently now, I decided to go back to school full-time and just finish. And so I did that. I did the graphic design and going to school full-time for 1 year to finish it. And then also during that time, like I dove headfirst into personal development. Like, so, reading books and being parts of programs. And like, I was obsessed, because it was like, if I let myself get to this point in my life that I was so like unhappy, then I wasn't going to allow that to happen again. I had to learn everything that I could about my own psychology. And so it was a really big, dive into myself during that process.
And I think that's an important point, because realistically for most people, when they have a challenge in their life, and we've worked with a lot of people that was their catalyst to really focus on personal development, because it's like what we teach is that the core is that you have to work on yourself, whether it is that you're trying to create a business, whether it is that you're trying to change something in your life, whether you're trying to whatever it is, it's really starts with you, whether a better relationship or whatever it is. You have to start focusing on you, really deep diving into yourself and really understanding the psychology and how to change some of those things. And that's really why I also went to school for psychology, because it's such powerful tools that when you learn them, you can really transform your life and really change the way that you view life. So let me ask you, what did you do like once you finished school? Like what's the next step at that point?
So funny story, at that point I was still doing the design, but a big part of my personal development focus had been saying, okay, well, if I know I don't like all these things, like I could make you a really long list of all the things I didn't like, but I wasn't really good at clarifying what I did like. So that was a big part of what I'd focused on. And so I had gone through like several different processes that helped me find my purpose. And one of the things that I had done is like really looked at my personality and my passions and my past, and actually a lot of that discovery process that I did for myself ended up being the core of what I began to use as a coach later on to help people find their purposes. And then it actually evolved further into the life purpose program that we teach today, both for people and also for coaches. So the core of what we teach now actually started back then when I was using it on myself. And so one of the things I did was I created a vision board of all the different things that I did like or want when it came to like what I did to make a living. And so I remember I had a lot of different things on there. Like I had public speaking, I had life coaching, I had like doing like big events like conferences and doing things. Like one specific thing that I remember is like the event where you do an activity and you have this giant ball that people bounce back and forth that's like 5 feet tall, like this massive ball. Like I had a picture of that on there. And I had a picture of working with youth and a whole bunch of other stuff. And so when I was making the vision board, I was kind of thinking like, I'd take any one of these ideas. Like, not that I was thinking I was going to get all of them. But so what had happened was I sat down and looked at a calendar when I was like, it was like 3 months before I graduated. And I looked at when graduation was, and then the next Monday, I circled the day on the calendar and I said, start work. And so then 3 months later, I'm a week or so before graduating. And I just go on and decide to check Craigslist one day. And I found this ad for a woman that was looking for a business partner to run a youth life coaching center. And I said, And so I met her, and her business partner had to leave. They had just opened. It had been about 6 weeks. And so we hit it off right away, and we decided that we were going to work together. And so I became partner in this business. And then I pulled out my calendar. It was my last week of school, and I looked, and there it was where I had circled start work on that Monday. And that's exactly the day that I started working with this new business. And so long story short on that business, that it was that first time where I saw that entrepreneurship could fit in with my purpose and my passion. Like I could actually do something that I cared about. And then ironically, all those things that I had put on that vision board ended up coming true, because one of the first things that I did at that company was create a program for the sheriff's department called the Parent Teen Challenge. And we were working with kids that had just gone through a boot camp program because they were first-time offenders. And we would work with them and their parents in an all-day program. And there I was, like doing the speaking and working with the youth. And we even had a game in there with one of those giant balls. And so like I got all of the things that I wanted just because I put them on a vision board. Like I know it's so silly to say that, but I was so clear about what I wanted that actually all came to me.
Amen. You also, and obviously we'll talk more about this and who the other business partner was, because that was actually me, and we had met shortly before I transitioned and left ALCC, and but we'll get more into that story. But you also had another business during that time as well. Do you want to tell us about that other business?
Yeah. So with this same business partner, we actually, I'd never been like someone who loves shopping or going to the mall, or specifically shopping for Christmas. But she had waited till like the last minute to do all of her Christmas shopping. And so she sucked me into going to the midnight shopping the night before Christmas. Or no, it was, no. It was the Thanksgiving. So it was Black Friday. And so it was the midnight thing. But she actually got a hotel room at the hotel that was at the mall, like in the mall where we lived, and got me to stay there with her and help her shop. So that's a weird thing for me to do to begin with. But then so we're there and we're walking down the mall, and there was a kiosk of people with electronic cigarettes. And this was before, like, this was probably like the first kiosk ever. Like no one had heard of it. And she sees it, and she was a smoker. And she just like went absolutely gaga over it. And so we were laughing about it the whole night, but we just couldn't stop talking about it because it was so fascinating when we just saw that there was a need for this, that this would be something that would take off. And so within a couple of weeks from then, we decided to go into the electronic cigarette business. And so we were researching it, and we went to Alibaba.com and had contracts with people making it over in China, and became like we created a website, and we're selling it there. We were also like selling it to smoke shops and stuff, which again is like totally not me, but I loved the fact that it was a business that had a big market. It was like new at the beginning of something, and it was, the first time I had a website that was getting sales and getting traffic on its own. Like at that point, it was so new, like we didn't even have to market. People were just finding it and buying it. So it was an exciting thing to be part of. And even though it was really strange, it was a great experience.
So what happened to your chronic fatigue during all this? Because obviously before you talking about how hard it was to even stay awake at a red light. Did it improve? Did it change?
So I still had very little help at all from doctors of any sort. One thing I was given a heads up about was changing my diet and keeping my blood sugar normalized. And I did that, and it made a little bit of a difference. But then when I actually, the snooze button incident, and then I quit my job. Well, when I quit my job, what I did was I just let my body sleep as long as it wanted. And I think it took me about 6 months, and my body just would sleep 9 or 10 hours every day before it would wake up on its own. And then one day I just remember waking up and just feeling like the fog had been lifted, like I had slept it off. But it wasn't all the way gone. So I think maybe the food helped 10 or 15%, not being sleep deprived and finally sleeping enough probably got me close to half better. But it wasn't until I made some major life changes that I finally got rid of the fatigue and kind of figured out what was going on. And so even though I'd improved, there was still this part of me that was like a hungry beast that wasn't being fulfilled, that just was angry and was unhappy. And so actually, at that event that I ran every week for the sheriff's department, I just got to see a lot of really intimate contact with the parents and their kids. And one of the activities, it was a conversation where I'd be playing music in the background, and then I'd be getting on the microphone and I'd be giving them a prompt, something to talk about. And so it was very, very intimate, and I got to witness this every week. People opening up and sharing and crying, and so it always really moved me, especially with the sappy music in the background. It gives me chills. I'd have to try to not cry all the time. But so this one day, I'm just watching this one family, and this girl is opening up, and she had her little brother with her. And mind you, these are first-time offenders, and a lot of them were very young and very scared, and they'd just gone through boot camp the day before. And so it was very emotional. And I just remember watching it and just having an epiphany one day, about a lot of things, but ultimately that what I realized is that I wasn't living my own life. I was living someone else's dream. I was in the marriage I was in because it matched what I knew. And I was, even though I had gotten out of the rat race, I was still playing a role. I wasn't really living authentically as myself. And so again, I reached another one of those points where you know what you need to do, but it scares the crap out of you. And so from that moment that I had the epiphany, within 3 months, I had literally wiped clean everything in my life. So that included a marriage, a house, a dog, and I realized that the business partner that I was working with was not in alignment with me, and the businesses that we were running, although they had their benefits, they weren't really what I wanted. And so I left. And again, we'll tell more of that story because you're part of that story too. But it was at that point that I wiped clear everything in my life that was not in alignment, which in that situation was basically everything. And by doing that, it's like my identity crumbled because I no longer was stuck being who I wasn't. And I wasn't quite sure who I was, but I knew who I wasn't. And I was definitely ready to move on. And once I did that and I released it and I went through this total transformation, it's like all of the things that were right for me started lining up. And the first of those was you. And a lot of things just continued to unfold from there. So it was like a second round of that process of like dramatically altering my life to be more in alignment. And so even the entrepreneurship at that point, I knew I loved running businesses, but I also knew that the ones I had wasn't right for me.
So what did you do after? And obviously, if you just want to give a quick hint, because obviously we're going to talk about it in another episode and deep dive into it. So I don't know if you want to share any of that real quick.
Yeah, well, really the biggest thing for me, I loved the coaching, but I realized that I wanted to work with people that wanted to change, not so much people that you had to drag through life or that were kind of being forced to go through the coaching experience. And so that was really the big differentiating factor. And of course, I didn't have any attachment to the smoking cessation. That was just fun entrepreneurship stuff. So, I learned a lot of lessons from it and I took a lot forward. And then the rest of what happened after that point will be in another episode.
That's right. So let me ask you the last question, which is, what is the biggest difference that you want to make in the life of those that you serve?
So, funny thing is when I went through that process way back then to figure out my own purpose, I actually I had all my notes. Actually, I still think I have them. And I had written down like a purpose statement. And that ultimately what that purpose statement said was that my purpose was to help people expand their minds and fulfill their potential. And so what's funny about it is about 5 years later, I had gone through the process a second time and forgotten that I had done it before. And I got to the end and I basically wrote down that my purpose is to help people find their purpose and open their minds. And then I moved and I found the original one and the two matched. And so I would say that the difference I want to make is still the same today. And that I've just gotten a little bit more clarity about in what ways I would like to see people and empower people to open their minds. And so I really am passionate about people recognizing that they have a choice how they live. And my life is a good example of that because I had to make some really hard choices. But in order to live in alignment with myself, I had to make those choices. And it was my choice. I could have definitely submitted. I could have stayed in my old life and been miserable and been sick forever. That was an option. And the fact that I chose not to do that has made all the difference. And also helping people see that they get to choose their reality. They get to create their reality. And that freedom is possible, whether it's freedom from the corporate rat race if you hate it, or freedom from a relationship that's holding you back. You can have that freedom. You can have financial freedom. It's another part of my journey is learning how to accept abundance versus being stuck in limitation. And then also I'm very passionate about helping people realize that self-employment is a form of self-empowerment, and it helps open up the doors for you to have more choices. And so it really all comes down to, regardless of if somebody wants to choose to stay in places where they're stuck or choose to not be an entrepreneur, all of those things are their choice. But I really want to see people embrace their own purpose and live their own potential, because everybody has something unique to be able to contribute to the world. And there's no way for them to do that if they don't open their mind to the possibilities.
Amen. So
Amen.
I just want to say, first of all, thank you for sharing your journey because obviously I'm part of your journey. So I'm always excited to hear you share it for other people to know what your background is and how you do it, because it really is a testament that we can really create anything that we want and that we always have that choice to really change. Because obviously we've been able to work with tens of thousands of people from all over the world at this point. For those of you that are not really familiar with us, that are just starting to look at the podcast, but it's just really looking at that you trusted the process, that you were able to let go of things that were not serving you, and really that you were able to grow and develop and constantly looking for your place of purpose, of passion. And even as knowing that throughout your life, especially since I've known you and seen you, is that you're constantly looking to grow. You're constantly reading, you're constantly listening to things, you're constantly taking notes. You probably write as much notes as there are words in a book when you're reading it, just because you want to process it, you want to integrate it into your life. And I think that's a great example for other people, because it's not just about taking in information, it's about applying information. So thank you for the inspiration that you are. Thank you for being that inspiration in my own life and being that person that is a guiding light and also a transformational force for not only me, for everyone that knows you and that gets to be exposed to you at some level. So thank you.
Aw, shucks.
Well, we hope to see you on the next episode.
Yes, that was fun. Looking forward to the next one.
Thank you, fellow Freedom Junkies, for listening. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe. And if you want to help us grow, please rate and share this podcast. You can also become a member of Freedom Nation. Visit freedomorbustpodcast.com and sign up to receive access to exclusive content and take the 21-day happiness challenge. As you know, we believe that entrepreneurship is the ultimate form of empowerment, which is why we created the Side Hustle Business Startup course for anyone looking to create their own income and take back their power. We offer an exclusive discount for our podcast listeners. Find out more at freedomorbustpodcast.com.